Can I thank Maggie for getting conference underway, and thank all of you, all of the many of you, old members and new, for joining us here for the weekend. So, what's new? In many ways, this party is new. This party is composed of so much new energy, enthusiasm, and talent now. I'm kind of overwhelmed. Maggie mentioned the Glasgow branch meeting that was held just a week after the referendum. And yeah, we normally meet in the back room of a pub, and we thought, it might be a bit tight this time. Some new members might turn up. And so we booked a bigger venue, and by the time that bigger venue was stowed to overflowing, I looked out the window and there was an enormous queue stretching down the path of people patiently waiting to get in. We had to hold a whole other meeting outside the venue. It was, I kind of stood there grinning, bewildered, and I'm going to feel a little bit like that for this whole weekend as well. It's so much to take in. Not just the campaign that we've recently been a part of, but the extraordinary energy that's coming and the things that we're going to be able to achieve together. It's hard to overstate how much of a moment this is. If you were in the Green Party, if you were a member of the Green Party a month ago, you're the old guard now. The young Greens are now bigger than our whole party was a month ago. And get this for a historic moment. The Glasgow branch is bigger than Edinburgh. Come on! Come on, Edinburgh. What are you playing at? Keep it going. But no, honestly, the number of emails and tweets and messages I've seen over the last few weeks about branch activity springing up around the country. Let's be honest, we've been a small party for too long. We've been saying this for several years now. It's not enough to be convinced that we're right and to be a small political party on the fringes. That's not enough. We shouldn't be satisfied with being that small party that is unable to get that active local campaigning out in every community around Scotland. That's what we need to be capable of. We said, well, we didn't quite realise how extraordinarily rapid the growth would be after the referendum, but that's what we're now going to be capable of, taking that message out right around the country. And it's fantastic to see so many of you here, but also so many branches springing up and local activism happening around the country where we've not had the capacity to do it before. Because that political re-engagement that Maggie mentioned, that sense of possibility, that sense that politics, as Caroline Lucas has argued and Natalie Bennett has argued in England and Wales, politics mustn't be something that's done to people. It must be something that we all do together, something that we take part in. That sense that has been missing from this country's politics for far too long, and it's suddenly begun to feel possible over the last few weeks and months in Scotland. It would be unworthy of any of us to allow that possibility to slip by. As one new member at that Glasgow branch meeting put it, it felt like it wasn't just a yes or no decision we were taking part in. It felt as though we were being given permission to imagine a better country, to imagine what a better Scotland looks like. That sense of possibility, that sense that we've all got the right and the power to imagine what a better country looks like and start putting that into practice, that spirit has to be what we keep alive in the period after the referendum. Now, many of us felt that it would have been easier to achieve that, easier to give real expression to that in the context of a yes vote. There's been a no vote. And even so, the window of opportunity for change is still open, and we need to keep pushing it open. We might need to work harder to give it the fullest expression that it can, but that possibility is still there, and a party like ours has got the ideas and the creativity to help make that happen. I really want to thank everybody who took part in the Green Yes campaign. I think it was passionate and creative. It was distinctively green, and that was important. We made the decision a few years back to join the Yes Scotland movement. But I see Alistair Whitelaw sitting up there. He was the one who moved an amendment to that motion to say, yes, we should do that, and also campaign distinctively with our own Green Yes campaign. That's what we did, and I think that's one of the reasons that our campaign was strong, that it was distinctively green. Those distinctive ideas were heard. We didn't just rabbit on about SNP policies. We didn't parrot the answers in the white paper. Where we agreed, we said we agreed. Where we didn't, we said we didn't, and we put forward distinctive, new and refreshing ideas instead. More to the point, though, and this is, I think, what I'm proudest of about the way we conducted ourselves during that campaign. We recognised that just being the Green Party, being convinced, looking at the state of the world, the state of it in ecological, social, economic and democratic terms, and recognising that a green response is the only rational response, it's an urgent response, that doesn't mean you're all voting the same way on the independence referendum. It would have been quite bizarre if everybody in the Green Party had been on the same side of that debate. And so we knew that we had, not only because that's who we are, but because that's the tone of debate Scotland deserves, we had to have that debate in a spirit of friendship. We had to demonstrate by the way we took part in that debate in communities up and down the country that it's possible to disagree about this issue in a spirit of friendship and respect. And I want to thank everybody for making sure that we did that all the way along. And I know that there are many people who are still very proud of being part of the 45% who voted yes. And there are some who are finding it difficult to accept that it wasn't a win. Some people who've been working for that goal for so long. But I think it's important to say that this dividing line between the 45% and the 55% is one that we're going to have to move beyond. Focusing too much on that is going to become increasingly meaningless. Because for many people, including many people in this party, that balance of views existed within individual minds. I've spoken to many people who said, well, I'm voting yes, but I'm only kind of 55% yes. Or I'm voting no, but I'm kind of 45% yes. There were many people along that spectrum of views. And unless we can find ways to express our politics in a way that appeals beyond that dividing line between yes and no voters, yes and no Green voters, and the wider electorate who voted yes and no, unless we can reach beyond that dividing line, then I think we'll have failed to capture the energy that does remain possible in the country. That dividing line is one that isn't relevant for us as individuals anymore. It isn't helpful for the party, and I think it would be damaging for Scotland as well to obsessively focus on that dividing line for the future. One of the things that Greens, I think, have always tried to do in politics is find the common ground. Never allowing our differences to be downplayed, never ignoring the distinctive Green message or putting that as in second order, second place to political short-term objectives, but also never allowing those differences to prevent us from finding the common ground where it does exist. And we do have areas we can work together with other parties across the spectrum, but finding common ground means being willing to move towards it. It means that your starting point is not necessarily going to be your end point. That kind of cooperation is going to be important in the process to come. How do we keep that window of opportunity open for change? Well, promises have been made. Promises have been made, and now the Smith Commission, which Maggie and I have been nominated by the Scottish Green Party Council to represent you and to represent our movement on. The Smith Commission is more or less up and running, hasn't actually met yet. The party, all five parties, were given 2 weeks between the invitation to take part and the deadline for our written submissions, which passed yesterday. We just about managed. The seat of our pants a wee bit, but we managed. We're the only party in this that's not already running one government or the other, or have a track record of having run both of them. We don't have a massive team of civil servants or officials to back us up, but we've managed that, and we've made a submission, and I hope it's one that you'll find a useful contribution to that debate. But after that 2-week timetable for political parties to have their say, there's just a few more weeks for the whole of the rest of Scotland to have their say. Political parties who campaigned in the referendum but who aren't part of the Scottish Parliament and so aren't on the Commission, NGOs, campaigners, academics, policymakers, community bodies, individual citizens right up and down the country who felt that permission to imagine a better Scotland, who felt the power that comes from political participation. But now what are they being told? Well, send us an email. We probably won't read them all, but, you know, that's what you can do. That's not enough. If this moment of incredible, compelling engagement is followed by a traditional political party stitch-up, we will have betrayed the trust of the whole electorate, however they voted. That's something that I don't think we can allow. So when the Scottish Parliament debated some of these issues just the other day, we moved an amendment saying that the Smith Commission, yes, the other parties have made their promises on a timescale, and they can't abandon that timescale now without again betraying the trust of the electorate, but that process has to be followed by genuine, meaningful public participation. There are so many examples from around the world of how to do that. Ideas from countries that have used civic assemblies, citizen assemblies, randomly selected juries, a whole host of traditional public meetings and new online social media to try and gather the views of the citizens, gather the views of the public and form those into creative solutions. There are ideas that have been bubbling away through Scotland, through our inclusive and dynamic debate over the last few months and years. Those ideas have to be brought back into the process, and the period after Smith reports at the end of November, there are still months to go before legislation is finally passed by the two parliaments after the UK election. Those months need to be used in as open and creative a way as we can, and both governments have got a responsibility to help make that happen. There'll be ideas that the Greens want to advocate within that. I think no political party should say our starting point is our end point and we're not open to negotiation. We should put ideas on the table and then see what everybody else thinks. But here are some of the things that we can put on the table for discussion. You know, so many people during the independence debate thought the idea of creating a written constitution for Scotland, for an independent Scotland, the ability to define what kind of country are we, write that down in a document that citizens can then use to hold governments accountable. That's the power of a written constitution. That idea shouldn't be out of the window just because there was a no vote. There are many places. There are many places around the world where jurisdictions below the level of fully independent countries do have a written constitution, and I think we need to keep that idea alive. Not only defining how we control Scottish democracy, so many of the domestic constitutional issues which the Scottish Parliament is unable to make decisions on, even its own voting system, even the need to get rid of an MSP who'd been convicted of domestic abuse offences. We were unable to act because that's a reserved power. Appalling situation, but also the opportunity for a constitution which entrenches the place of local democracy, local decision making, so that national governments of any political persuasion can no longer gather power to themselves and underplay the creativity of local communities. As well as that written constitution, the economic powers will of course be front and centre of that debate. And for the three UK parties who seem at the moment to be rowing back to their positions from spring and forgetting about the much more radical forms of devolution that they were talking about in the closing stages of the referendum, for some of them it's just a contest about percentages of tax revenue that gets raised in Scotland. Well, if we go down that route and we just talk about what proportion of tax gets raised in Scotland within an envelope of major economic policy choices that are all made at Westminster, then any Scottish government will find itself unable to do anything but implement Westminster's economic policy for them. And right now, that means one thing. It means austerity. We need Scotland to have the ability to set its own economic direction. That means borrowing powers. It means the ability to decide the balance of taxation, not just the proportion of taxation that comes from income tax or anything else. We need the ability to set industrial and employment policy. We need the ability to set the direction of Scotland's economy in a way that's right for Scotland's circumstances and accords with Scottish voters' values. That's what we need, not the duty to implement austerity on their behalf. And we need the opportunity to build a welfare state that's worthy of the name. What we have in this country is no longer a welfare state. It's not designed for human welfare and well-being. It's designed to bully people into low-paid work, subsidise that low-paid work, and as for those who can't work or can't find work or can't find enough work, devil take the hindmost. That is not a welfare state, it's a humiliation state, and we need the ability to build a welfare state that's worthy of the name, not simply to implement the same brutalising agenda that we see from Westminster. And we need our own voice in the world as well. Not only when international issues which affect devolved matters are being debated and discussed. Scotland at the moment has no automatic right to take part in UK delegations. But when issues like the trade deal that's brewing between Europe and the US, TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, when issues like that are being discussed, which have the profound threat of handing over yet more power to unaccountable corporate lawyers, power that should be democratically accountable in our society, I think Scotland also needs the ability to speak up, speak out, and with our colleagues in the green movements around the rest of Europe and the world, oppose that kind of damaging agenda as well. And there's a host of other areas which are close to the heart of green politics, from transport and the ability to have publicly owned railways instead of handing them over either to private sector companies or somebody else's public sector. If somebody else's public sector can run our railways, why can't we have our own, honestly? The ability to have a bit more coherence around energy policy. Right now we've got responsibility for energy efficiency, one of the most obvious, easy to do things that we can do to reduce people's bills, to reduce energy waste, reduce CO2 emissions. But the more we spend from devolved budgets on energy efficiency, the more we risk losing the investment that comes from the energy companies, because that's all regulated at UK level. The ability to say no to the dangerous, irresponsible and unnecessary expansion of onshore unconventional oil and gas extraction. The fracking licenses that the UK government is handing out, the legislation they want to impose to allow fracking companies to drill under land without consent. These things are areas where Scotland needs the ability to stand up and say no. Actually, we're halfway there. We don't have control over the licensing. We don't have control over that legislation. We do have control over the planning and environmental regulation. And anybody in any political party who takes a stance of saying that they're against these things needs to be willing to use the powers they have, even if that can only get us part of the way, even if that can only give us partial protection, they need to be willing to do that immediately. So on energy, on transport, on immigration as well, on a whole host of policy areas, our submission to the Smith Commission advocates an approach that gives Scotland the ability to make its own choices when necessary. But what's going to come after the Smith Commission, of course, and before the implementation of any deal, is the UK election. So what's the story of that election going to be? Well, from one party you're going to hear yet more attempts to indulge the privilege and assault everybody else in society, scrapping our human rights, our hard-won and vital human rights, destroying our public services and leaving us with an ever meaner and harsher society. And from the main opposition party, from the Labour Party, the tragedy of a party that looks in the mirror and sees the emptiness in its own face, where once there was a radical political movement against even this government, and after the utter failure of that deregulated, privatised, free market model that Labour helped to build in the first place, even after the historic failure of that model, they remain unable to offer a coherent alternative to the same austerity agenda. That's tragic. It really is. And as for the Liberal Democrats, well, you remember in 2010, they went around half the country saying, vote for us, we're the only way to keep the Tories out. And then the other half of the country, vote for us, we're the only way to get rid of Gordon Brown. And Nick Clegg danced around the middle saying, we've ruled nothing in and we've ruled nothing out. Well, they're about to do exactly the same thing again. They're pointing at the Tories and saying, you can't trust these people to run the country because they have no heart and they'll destroy social justice. And they point at Labour and say, you can't trust these people to run the country because their cuts won't be deep enough and they'll wreck the economy. And you know that they'll do a deal with anybody, just for a chance of hanging on. And then, of course, we see the nauseating sight of a wealthy right-wing merchant banker held aloft by a right-wing press, but posing as the anti-establishment rebel. And they've got their first MP elected. That's nice. Maybe they'll get some media coverage at last, eh? We and our colleagues in the Green Party of England and Wales, we can't allow these people to be the story of next year's election. Caroline has been an astonishing first MP, first Green representative at Westminster. I'm a massive fan. She's just invited some of us to go down and campaign in the south coast of England. I've had the privilege of being welcomed to house sit at Caroline's house when she was away on our holiday, and I'm a big Brighton fan as well as a big Caroline fan. She's been a powerful advocate, but she is facing a serious challenge from a Labour Party that's simply embarrassed at the presence of a genuinely progressive voice on the landscape. And I think we need to help. We've got a huge opportunity in next year's election in Scotland. But before then, I think we need to take the opportunity to go down, to help, and to learn from the successful campaigning experience that they have in Brighton and bring that back and then use it at election time in Scotland as well. So if people do want to contribute financially or contribute time, Scotland needs that, but so does Brighton, and it would be appalling if we were to lose that fantastic voice that Caroline Lucas is at Westminster. So what of the SNP and what of the Scottish election? Well, the SNP, we've worked with them over the last few months and years, and I've found that sometimes an area of creative tension. Very often it's been successful. Very often I've enjoyed it, and I certainly wish Nicola Sturgeon very well as she seems likely to take over the leadership of that party. I don't think it's any great secret that I've probably got more time personally for Nicola than, well, for some others in the SNP. I think she's a great local MSP, and I think she's clearly going to have the opportunity to take her party in a new direction. But they're going to have to pick a choice. They're going to have to pick a direction. because they've been a broad church for a very long time. They've got people who ideologically, on economic policy, for example, would be happy on the right of the spectrum, and those who would be happy on the hard left of the spectrum as well. They've got passionate environmentalists in that party, and they've got Fergus Ewing. You know, they're going to have to, as they approach the Westminster election and beyond that, with any additional powers to Scotland, they're going to have to start setting some economic choices and making decisions about areas of policy that they've been able to point the finger at Westminster for a long time, but without taking a clear stance and defining their party in that clear way. So that's going to be interesting. The Earth decision, the coal bed methane project that's been called in by Scottish ministers, is going to be a test case on those crucial climate and energy issues, because it's all very well to set ambitious targets. Meeting them is very, very different. But even trying to meet those climate change targets while drilling for every drop of oil from the North Sea, that's not compatible. Allowing that to happen onshore as well, using coal bed methane, fracking to add even more stocks of fossil fuels, stocks that we can't afford to burn, that's not a coherent approach. And so when they make that decision, and they either give the go-ahead or they turn down the proposal for Earth, we need to be setting that as a clear test case. And if they do make the right decision and turn it down, we need to be absolutely clear that this is a beginning of a moratorium, a ban, a prohibition, call it what you like, but we want to say no to this industry in Scotland. So we do have the opportunity, I think, those of us who voted yes and those of us who voted no, to try and change the political landscape, as Caroline said, not just of Scotland but of the rest of the UK. Finding the common ground without ever downplaying those crucial, distinctive green challenges. Can we, though, can Scotland find a way to keep this vision of a better society alive? To create a progressive force that will counter the rise of the purple menace down south. New members as well as old are going to be crucial to that. We need to hear from you what your priorities are, because there are decisions to be made about the direction of the Scottish Green Party which are bigger than we've ever faced before. We're a bigger party, we've got more resources, we've got more potential and energy and talent, but we've got some bigger decisions to make than we've ever had to make before. So over the next couple of days and over the next weeks and months, as you get active in branches up and down the country, we need to hear from you about your priorities and your view of the way forward. Crucially, we're going to need the resources that all of Scotland, all of our supporters throughout the country, including those who haven't chosen to join a political party, we're going to need to ask them for help as well. So today we've launched a crowdfund appeal to build the kind of fighting fund that we're going to need for the Westminster election, the Holyrood and local elections to come after that. And I do ask you to share that link, share that crowdfund appeal, make sure that all of those people who liked the Green message over the last few months, whether they've joined the party or not, feel able to and know that we need them to contribute to our fighting fund for the next few elections. The final thing that I want to say is about cooperation in politics, because, as I said, we've done that with political parties throughout from the beginning of devolution onwards, from Robin Harper's presence on the political stage in 1999 as the first Green MSP, right through our high points and our low points. We've always found ways to work together with others. But that goes beyond party politics as well. It goes beyond party politics, particularly in the current session, where we've had the opportunity to form what we lovingly call the Grindies, the Green Independent Group of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament. I already deeply miss Margot MacDonald, not just her distinctive presence, but her friendship in the Scottish Parliament. And I am privileged to be taking forward legislation on her behalf on assisted suicide. But beyond Margot, beyond Margot, we've had the privilege as well of working with the most recent independent, John Wilson, as well as with two who left the SNP over the issue of NATO, Jean Urquhart and John Finnie. John, in particular, has been an advocate of many of the same issues that I worked on actually in the second session when I was given the justice portfolio. Some of the civil liberties issues, some of the issues around firearms just recently that he's very assiduously pushed the Scottish Government on and pushed Police Scotland on, and now we've seen a reversal of the decision to routinely deploy firearms on the streets of Scotland. And so, for that reason, and for many others, I'm excited and delighted to be able to tell you that the most recent recruit to the Scottish Green Party is John Finnie MSP. John, come on.
Thank you very much. I was checking if you were going to get a Matinvar, a Feskerma. You're getting a Matinvar. The good news is this isn't a speech. Gavin thought I should bring this up. It's my membership form. I have to say the cheque is as yet uncashed, and the first bit of gratitude I have is not just for the welcome, but also for accepting the membership, because it was in my famously illiterate and illegible handwriting, so thank you for that. Can I say that it's been a real privilege to have been involved most recently in the independence referendum campaign, where I've had the opportunity to speak with my colleagues at many, many meetings. I like the green language. It's become apparent that that's the language that I have liked all along. If you know how Jean and I have conducted ourselves since we left the party of government, it is to work consensually with people. On the firearms issues, the first thing I did was to secure a meeting with the Police Scotland and invite all of my colleagues. That's the way we need to do things. I have to say that's the approach, that's the green approach. There's challenges we face, and they were highlighted, and sadly I don't think we're going to be addressed so efficiently as a result of the independence referendum. I agree with Patrick. We need to move on, we need to build bridges. This is not about name calling, this is not about badging, this is about trying to make the place more equal. The United Kingdom is one of the most unequal countries in the world, and there's an opportunity, I think, adopting the green approach, a radical approach, and I like the word radical. I don't think people should be offended with it. It's what's invigorated many communities. I can think in the town of Inverness there, where a community where the turnout was 30%, targeted by the radical independence movement, people from all parties, including the Greens, an 80% turnout. That's what we must hold on to. So the opportunities are there. And the language of the Green Party is the language of social justice, environmental justice, and I'm proud to be associated with it, and thank you for accepting my membership. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure that in a strictly non-violent way I'm going to have my knuckles wrapped because I've overrun a little bit. Fringes, discussion, debate, creativity. Enjoy the weekend.